Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine.
Hello everyone, I'm Troy Moling, and thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. Glad you could join us for our first show of February. Let's jump right in. So starting things off today, UNL Cow-Calf Specialist Kacie McCarthy says thinking about how you're going to manage your bulls through the winter is important so they can be prepared for the next breeding season. Writing for UNL's December Beef Watch newsletter, she offers some ways proper nutrition and cold weather management factor into your cattle operations profitability. Market Journal's Bill Dodd spoke with her and has more.
Bulls are a tremendous investment for cattle producers. When making considerations about your bull battery, winter preparedness is essential. Between nutritional needs, cold weather management, and prepping for the following breeding season, there's a lot to manage when it comes to keeping your bulls in optimal breeding condition during the winter months.
Yeah, so when we think about bulls in our bull battery, the first thing that comes to mind is making sure that these guys are ready for the breeding season, and then not forgetting about these guys at the end of the breeding season. So when you look at some survey data across the U.S., roughly 87 to 90% of operations utilize bulls as natural service breeding. And so these guys are a large investment for operations and for producers. And so we need to make sure that these guys are ready to breed, so they are satisfactory breeders in terms of our breeding soundness exams. They're in a good condition moving into and out of the breeding season. And then these guys can cover a lot of ground and be able to cover a lot of females depending on the bull to cow ratio that we're thinking about for our breeding season and operations.
Weight loss for bulls during the breeding season is inevitable. Furthermore, if you're dealing with bulls that haven't reached full maturity, you may discover they will lose a higher amount of weight by the end of the breeding season.
Bulls can lose anywhere from 100 to 200 pounds, if not more. And a lot of that depends on the age of those bulls, workload. And so when we think about our bull to cow ratios, usually we try and target a 1 to 25 bull to cow ratio. But these bulls are having to cover a lot of ground, so there's increased activity. These guys are working. This is their kind of, on season. Off season is a little different. When these bulls are during breeding season, these guys need to be able to cover some ground, cover females. And so they're working hard. And so we see our younger bulls that they might be losing more weight during the breeding season than some of our mature bulls, but we do lose 1 to 2 body condition on those bulls during the working season.
Just as you would want to maintain the body condition score of your cow herd, maintaining a healthy BCS in your bulls into and throughout the winter will have a great impact on their reproductive prowess.
So when we think about body condition of our bulls through the breeding season, we usually try and target anywhere from a 5 to a 6. Now, if those bulls have lost condition, we need to make sure that we can get that weight back on those bulls prior to that next breeding season. If these bulls need to gain some weight, then we can look at how we're feeding them over that winter time point to get them back up into an adequate condition of 5 or 6. And so when we think about monitoring condition, a big part of why we want to do that is make sure that these bulls, if they're losing some of that energy during the winter due to cold, they can maintain that body weight for an extended period of time. They're not having to use a lot of energy prior to that breeding season. When we think about condition, heavier bulls, there can be impacts on fertility and semen production, and so being able to keep them in that moderate condition, it'll be important.
When it comes to maintaining a suitable body condition score for your bulls, the biggest concern you should take into account are nutritional needs and cold weather management.
When we evaluate those bulls coming out of the breeding season, they might have lost some weight. And so ultimately, if we can take a look at what forage resources we have, where these bulls are going, so are they going back in a pen? Do we have pasture for these bulls to winter in? And so then we can gauge, what forage resources we have available, maybe if it is in the pasture, or if maybe we need to supplement a hay, or if those bulls maybe lost quite a bit of weight, maybe are a little thinner, or some of our younger bulls. This is a great opportunity to add an energy and protein source, such as a distillers, or maybe doing a mixed ration with some silage and hay. But then it's also important to think about a mineral program in the winter. And so some of those important minerals we'll be thinking about would be our selenium, which is really important for sperm integrity, and then also thinking about copper, zinc. Those are also really important in terms of semen characteristics and motility. And then also thinking about maybe some iodine or some of our vitamins like vitamin A. If those bulls are on a dormant forage, those will all be important to consider. Also thinking about keeping those bulls off of the frozen ground will be really important, so we're not impacting any frostbite to those scrotums, which ultimately impacts fertility in the end. And so if we can provide some type of straw or clean ground for those bulls during the winter, that'll be really important to help maintain condition and due to any loss due to the cold.
As you go through the winter months, if you make sure to provide ample protection and bedding for your bulls, as well as optimize nutrition to ensure they can gain back a healthy amount of weight, then your bulls should come through the winter with flying colors. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
Thanks, Bill. If you'd like to learn more on this subject, we've posted a link on the Market Journal website. Moving over to markets now, and you may have heard the news regarding hedge funds and a handful of stocks that caused some extra volatility on Wall Street. Well, I spoke with University of Illinois Ag Economist Scott Irwin this week. He says that instability didn't necessarily carry over to the ag markets, but he is tracking commodity prices, crop demand, and next week's WASDE report. We talked about all that, but he started by telling me what the big focus will be in the ag markets through February.
I think the big things that are going to be on the market's minds, one, the continuing assessment of what is the total size of Chinese demand for U.S. feed grains and oilseeds. This is the big question. I mean, we just saw those huge purchases of corn last week. I think that everyone in the marketplace is on high alert on that issue. And then I think you're beginning to see it, but attention is very quickly going to switch to acreage prospects for the U.S. this spring for corn and soybeans.
Yeah, let's talk about that. What have you been hearing in regards to acres?
Well, I've been fascinated by watching the market price movements for the new crop corn, soybeans versus the new crop corn. And the bottom line is the U.S. is going to be, it looks like, functionally out of soybeans by the end of the summer, next summer. And we have a large enough demand base built up that the market, I believe, has to incentivize an increase in soybean acreage of at least 6 or 7 million acres over last year. But the market then got hit with 172 bushel final yield from the USDA in the January final estimates. And so the corn rally took off and China's buying soybeans. And so you see strength in the corn market. And I think the market is really struggling with providing the proper incentives that I think are really needed to build stocks in the soybean market. I don't see any way how we don't need at least 91 or 92 million plus acres of soybeans planted in the US this spring. That's a big switch. In order to get that, you're going to have to provide some strong incentives relative to corn prices. But the strength in corn prices makes that all that much harder to achieve. So that's the way I look at it.
WASDE report coming out next week too. Any guesses as to what we could see?
Well, I think one of the big things that the market's going to be looking for again is the USDA going to raise their corn and soybean export estimates. They almost have to raise for sure the corn export number. I'm hearing a lot of chatter in the marketplace that they're going to raise it 300 million bushels. I actually think if that's the market's expectation, there's a good chance that there'll be some disappointment, because I think the USDA's position will be, yeah, China's buying a lot, driving the price up, but that means that we'll have some trade diversion and some of our other business will go someplace else. So that the net effect won't be a plus 300 million for the US. I would look probably for the USDA to maybe increase corn exports 150 to 200 million bushels. I could anything between 100 and 200 million up, I would find reasonable. And then another bump of 25 to 40 million at least on soybeans. So that's my expectation.
Scott, lots of great information from you today. Did you have any other marketing or risk management advice that you'd like to leave us with? Well,
I know it's been dry this winter in a lot of the Midwest. I want to emphasize, the analysis that I've done and seen of others is that, yeah, it might be dry next summer, but it might be really wet and a great summer too. And we need to, I think, just understand that the dry weather this winter, doesn't tend on average to have much correlation with what is going to be like next summer. And that's important from a risk management perspective. These are very high prices relative to what we were looking at just 6 months ago. So I think it's prudent to be doing some, probably more pre-harvest selling this year than a farmer would ordinarily do. I'm not advocating, super risky strategies like sell it all now because the price is high. No, but to me, as a minimum, if you're taking the federal revenue crop insurance, at least sell the part that you don't insure. Something simple like that. And even more than that, I think is probably prudent at depending on where you're at, what your opportunities are, but kind of roughly looking at $4 corn and $10.50 to $11 soybeans. Have any kind of reasonable growing season, that'll be profitable levels for the vast majority of producers. And so I think very hard about taking some of this risk off the table, because we're going to have huge acreage here in the US this spring. And if we get good weather next summer, we're going to have huge crops and prices will go down very rapidly.
Next week, we'll be joined by Trados's Doug Simon. Next up, with U.S. harvest firmly in the rearview mirror, eyes have shifted to South America. Anthony Speight is a market analyst covering Brazil and Argentina. He joined me to give an update on South American crop conditions, beginning with soybean harvest in Brazil.
So usually the soybean crop in Brazil is planted from September to December and harvested from January through to May. So with the dry weather that we had just before Christmas and over Christmas, it actually delayed field work and planting of soybeans. So obviously crops have gone in late and they're going to be harvested later at the moment. But for example, Troy, if I was going to give you an example of delays in the Mato Grosso region of Brazil, which is one of the most productive soybean regions in Brazil, harvest progression at the moment, as of last week, I believe, is at 1.7%. But this time last year, the Mato Grosso region had actually harvested 15%. So that just shows that a very productive region of Brazil is actually quite far behind. And this will be from late crop development.
Is it a similar story in Argentina too?
Yeah, so soybeans for in Argentina for soybeans, so they're set to produce about 48 million tons of soybean this year. So usually the soybean plant in Argentina planting window is from October to January, and they harvest from about April to June. So again, like I was saying, with the moderate La Nina, we've had soybean crops go into dry ground and hinder development. But if you look at the crop condition last year, 59% of crop was excellent and good, and only 21% this year is excellent to good. And when we look at moisture content as well, that isn't as good as last year too. So we are seeing that the dry weather within South America is having a significant impact on crop conditions at the moment. They don't look as good as they did last year momentarily.
Are you expecting any challenges in getting that crop to market or infrastructure issues?
So as far as infrastructure goes, I know that around this time of the year, especially in Argentina, we've recently had truckers who, this time of year when crops are due to come to market, they all suddenly decide to strike, and people at ports as well, exporting, decide to strike as well. There has been stuff like that, but as delay goes this year it's to market, I think it's going to be the physical crop which is going to be delayed this year to market, especially in soybeans. But then also, Troy, there are other implications within markets that can help drive them. So stuff like political intervention, you know, we've seen it in Europe with Russia and export tariffs. A couple of weeks ago, the Argentinian government actually advocated they were going to ban maize exports, which they later reverted because farmers kicked off. You know, they grow a significant amount of maize. You know, nearly 50 ton of maize, 70% of that is actually exported, and you get told, oh, actually, you can't export your crop that you just put in the ground. So, yeah, there are apart from physical constraints of like roads and stuff, there's also political things that can really put a the bullish sentiment into a market.
Finally, Anthony, for the past several weeks on the show, we've talked a lot about the rallies that we're seeing in corn and soybeans. So my question to you is, has there been anything like that in South America?
I would say the biggest rally you probably get from domestic farm gate prices in Brazil and Argentina are very currency related to the dollar. So devaluing of currency, devaluing the Brazilian real, as I said, will inflate domestic prices, which it has, and has caused actually a lot of people to forward sell crops. As far as the pricing of Brazilian maize, like domestic maize, I don't really know the intricate details of that. It will be off a basis of Chicago soybean or Chicago maize, but I don't know if that is a premium or a discount to that, but it will price off that futures.
Anthony also tells me the delayed planting for Brazil's safrinha crop could have more market implications. Brazil is projected to produce about 80 million tons of safrinha. Next up, Wayne Rasmussen has employed many tools in a fight to save his pastures from invasion of eastern red cedar trees. But on his grazing lands north of Winnetoon in Knox County, prescribed fire has been the tool of choice. He began using fire in 2015 when he divided his pastures into 7 burn paddocks with a plan to defer grazing in one paddock each year to build fuel load for a prescribed burn the following year. Through this process, Rasmussen is reclaiming grasslands with fire and rejuvenating warm season grazing lands for his cattle. You can read all about Rasmussen's strategies in the February Nebraska Farmer. Time now for weather with Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher. Al, after last week, it was good to have a quieter week as far as the weather is concerned. Can you give us an idea of what the forecast holds?
Well, Troy, we've seen a fairly benign pattern over this last week until we got toward the end of the week. And of course, we've seen the first shots of cold air come in on Thursday. And subsequently, we got a couple more shots of cold air coming down the pipeline. And some very brutal conditions that are going to develop in terms of temperatures as we go through the vast majority of the next 10-day period, unfortunately. So the benefit is that we didn't see the big snowstorm the GFS model was indicating last week. The flip side is the cold air that it was advertising is coming in, and the main intersection of that cold air and the original trough thought to bring the big snows actually hit more to the east of us, southern Minnesota and Iowa. So as we go through this weekend, prepare to bundle up. It's going to be cold. And here we go with the upper air pattern, basically showing a big, large trough developing across the central United States, with the main core of cold air still yet to arrive here in Nebraska. This will push through the day, bringing our temperatures down into the lower 20s. Chance of flurry activity along the front range of the Rockies as that cold air pushes toward the south and the west. And as we go into tomorrow, yet another secondary push of cold air will come in to reinforce this first push of cold air coming from our north. Low pressures lined up along the front side of the Rocky Mountains will give just enough lift with this little bit of moisture that's there to once again generate light snowfall activity. And as we get into Monday with the cold air pushing toward our south, very bitter conditions will develop across the state. We'll be looking at highs in the single digits to teens, and the chance for snowfall. Unfortunately, with this very dry and cool air mass, a little bit of moisture goes a long way. And as we go into the day on Tuesday, we start to see some little bit of relaxation as this cold air starts to move east, but the rebound's only going to be a degree or two. We're still going to be looking at teens to upper single digits, with again that constant chance for flurry activity. Now, as we get into Wednesday, we start to see signs of lifting of this trough. Much warmer air will start to build into the southern plains, and some of that will make it into southwest Nebraska. We'll probably break the 20-degree mark, but for the remainder of us, we're probably going to stay pretty much in the teens with light snowfall. Now, as we get into Thursday, we start to see that cold air pushing off toward the east and some energy moving in the southern stream. So this energy pushing out will generate upslope flow conditions across the west slopes of the Rocky Mountains and will generate some light snowfall, and some of that may spill over into western Nebraska. But more importantly, as we get into the day on Friday, yet another big batch of cold air starts to push southward and southwestward. So we're going to see a reinforcing shot of this cold air and a return to very bitter conditions as we go into next weekend. But once again, the chance for snow showers along the front range of the Rockies. As we go out even farther, next Thursday through following Tuesday, the cold air starts to push toward the east, and we start to see a warming trend to the west moving in. And in terms of precipitation, we're still going to be dealing with that cold air coming in, so it's going to create upfloat snow, light snow possibilities. But after that, our attention turns to whether or not we're going to generate some significant snowfall. So Troy Overall, cold this next week, no getting around it.
Thanks, Al. We want to end the show today by telling you about a couple of events you can take part in. First up, the Animal Manure Management Team has made changes to the format of live land application training events due to COVID-19. This month and next, they'll offer multiple online sessions to serve as the first portion of the initial training. Recertification training and the last segment of initial training will be held at a later date.
The land application training days are going to be a little different this year. We're doing initial training actually through 3 Zoom sessions, followed by an in-person session. And then the recertification training will just be an in-person session, but we're not holding those until sometime, hopefully in June, with the thought that hopefully we can actually do them in person rather than having to do them virtually like we're having to for initial training. But we wanted to go ahead and get started with the initial training. We thought that folks were probably busy enough in June that they would want to get at least some of it out of the way and not have to do the whole thing at once. Just like to say that we're going to try and keep these as interactive as possible. They're only going to be about an hour-and-a-half session each time, so that we are not going to turn you all into zombies. We're hoping that we can keep them fun, and we'll do our best to keep them interactive, and we do want your participation, so come prepared to do that.
The 3 main training sessions will focus on minding your manure manners, complementary roles of manure and fertilizer, and benefits and barriers to manure use. All sessions are available in a bundle price or individual cost per session attended.
So manure training, like I said before, for permitted livestock operations has to happen every 5 years. So you do the initial training, and then in 5 years or less if you so choose, but it's required every 5 years to do this recertification training. Or I mean, you can go through the whole thing again if you really want to, but it's not required to go through the whole thing. You would just need to attend that recertification. Each individual session can be registered for individually, and they're $10 a piece if you're going to attend just one of them. If you require the initial training, meaning all 4 sessions, the 3 Zooms and the recertification or the in-person training, though that is $75 for the whole works. And then once we get to that point where we're going to have those recertification trainings, those will be $50.
To register or for additional information, visit manure.unl.edu or contact Leslie Johnson at 402-584-3818. And you'll also want to mark your calendars for the 36th Annual Women in Agriculture Conference. It takes place on February 18th and 19th in a virtual setting. And even though it may look a little different from past years, Conference Director Jessica Groskopf says the information producers will get is just as timely and informative.
Each day we'll have a keynote speaker and a workshop option, which will be live for participants to view. Then we'll also have a series of on-demand workshops that participants can look at their leisure. So our conference covers the 5 areas of agriculture risk management: production, market, financial, human risk, and legal risk. And so our workshops cover a variety of topics, everything from record keeping to farm estate and transition planning, lease agreements, and being an advocate.
One of the keynote speakers will be Elaine Fraze. She's a writer and coach who specializes in helping farm families work through issues surrounding communication and farm succession. Registration is open up until the day before the event, and anyone involved in agriculture can participate.
If you register on or before February 7th, the cost is $25. If you register on or after February 8th, the price increases to $30 per participant. We're very pleased to offer several scholarships, both to students and new and beginning farmers and ranchers. And there's no limit to the number of participants that we will be taking in our event this year.
Definitely going to be a great time. For more information and to register for the event, visit wia.unl.edu/conference. That's going to do it for this week's show. If you missed a story, be sure to download the Market Journal mobile app, or you can follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. And don't forget, you can get the latest updates on the coronavirus outbreak at covid19.unl.edu. Hope to see you right back here next time. I'm Troy Moling. Thanks for watching.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.